All right, buckle up because we're taking a trip back to the 80s today, folks. Big hair, neon colors, synth pop. Ready to dive into the world of Culture Club.
I'm there. Country Club, they were something else. Not just a band, but a whole vibe.
Totally. And you've given us so much to work with their backstory, the music, and of course, we got to talk about Karma Chameleon. But first, can you believe they almost called themselves Sex Gang Children?
Whoa, can you imagine? That would have definitely raised some eyebrows back then.
Talk about a different first impression. Thank goodness they landed on Culture Club. It just fits, especially when you think about all the different backgrounds in that band. Boy George, Roy Hay, Mikey Craig, John Moss. Not your typical lineup, even now. Do you think that mix played into their sound?
Oh, absolutely. Their music, it was like a melting pot of genres, new wave, soul, pop, even a little reggae and calypso thrown in. You can hear it all swirling around in there.
Yeah, it's such a unique blend. And that, combined with Boy George's look, man, they really shook things up, especially back in the early 80s when everyone was still all about fitting in.
Exactly. They challenged those norms, and Boy George, he was leading the charge. His whole androgynous style, it forced people to rethink their assumptions about gender, about identity. Years before those conversations were happening in the mainstream. They were pioneers.
No doubt, it makes their early success even more impressive. That first album, Kissing to Be Clever, huge hit. Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? Topping the charts in, what, like 20 countries?
Global domination. It shows you the power of their music, how it connected with people everywhere, and that reggae feel on Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? Pure genius. It shouldn't work, but it totally does. And then they followed up with Time, Clock of the Heart, a song so classic, it made it onto the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's list of the 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. Talk about a legacy. They had this knack for writing songs that were catchy, but also, like, emotionally intelligent.
You said it. And speaking of catchy, Color by Numbers. That album sold over 10 million copies. 10 million. It's mind-boggling.
Color by Numbers was massive. It wasn't just an album, it was a cultural moment.
Right.
And right at the center of it all.
Karma Chameleon. I bet everyone listening is singing it in their heads right now. But before we get to the lyrics, can we talk about that album cover for a second? Boy George in that oversized coat, the colors poppin', it's iconic.
Such a striking image, right? It sums up everything Culture Club was about. Bold, vibrant, completely and totally themselves. They did not shy away from standing out, from pushing boundaries, musically and visually. And that boldness, it comes through in their music too, especially Karma Chameleon.
Which, on the surface, seems like a simple pop song. But the lyrics, there's a real depth there, a kind of introspection you don't always hear in pop music.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big part of why it resonated with so many people. It worked on multiple levels, a catchy tune with something deeper going on beneath the surface.
That line, I'm a man without conviction, I'm a man who doesn't know how to sell a contradiction. Wow. Those words hit differently when you remember what Boy George was going through publicly with his identity at the time.
It's like a confession almost, a raw and vulnerable expression of self-doubt and the pressure to conform. And this was a time when being different, being open about who you are, it was still really challenging.
It's like he's saying, this is me, world, take it or leave it. And for the most part, the world embraced it. But that kind of honesty, putting yourself out there like that, it takes a toll, doesn't it? Especially when you're living life in the public eye.
No question. Fame, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It can give you this incredible platform, but it also magnifies everything, the pressure, the scrutiny.
And in Culture Club's case, those pressures weren't just coming from outside the band, right?
Right. You had the internal struggles, conflicts within the band itself.
And of course, Boy George's personal challenges, his battle with addiction, it was all happening very publicly.
And it definitely had an impact on the band, on their career. Their next album, Waking Up with a House on Fire, it didn't quite reach the same heights as Color by Numbers did it.
It did go platinum, though,
Yeah.
and gave us the war song.
Oh, the war song. Now there's a fascinating one. Here you have this flamboyant pop group releasing a powerful anti-war anthem.
It showed a different side of them, for sure. They were afraid to take a stand.
And speaking of taking a stand, we can't forget Boy George's involvement in Band-Aid.
Oh, man. Can you imagine getting that call? Bob Geldoc's on the line like, hey, we're recording this song for famine relief tomorrow. Can you hop on a plane and be in London? Talk about pressure.
And he didn't even hesitate. He could have easily said no, said he was too busy, focused on his own career. But he recognized the urgency, the importance of what they were doing. And Do They Know It's Christmas became an anthem, raise millions for famine relief.
It shows you the power of music, right? To bring people together, to inspire action.
Absolutely. But for Culture Club, their own momentum, it was kind of derailed by
Sure.
those internal conflicts, the pressures of fame.
Yeah, their fourth album, From Luxury to Heartache, it came out during a really tough time for Boy George.
His struggles were so public, it really overshadowed the music. And from Luxury to Heartache, it had some great tracks. Move Away should have been a smash hit.
Such a catchy song. But it's easy to forget. Behind the music, the celebrity, there's a real person hurting.
Exactly. Artists, they're not immune to life's challenges. If anything, the spotlight makes them more vulnerable.
And sadly, for Culture Club, they couldn't weather the storm. The band broke up in 1986, which felt like the end of an era.
It did. But their influence, their impact, it didn't just disappear. Their music was still everywhere. On the radio, MTV, a whole new generation discovered them. They were gone, but not forgotten.
And thankfully, it wasn't really the end, was it? They reunited, proved that time and maybe a little karma can heal old wounds. And that reunion in the late 90s, it was like they'd never been gone. Remember that VH1 Storytellers they did? I was glued to the TV.
They were fantastic. It showed how strong their connection was, musically and personally. They could have easily walked away, just to let Culture Club be a fond memory. But they came back together, and on their own terms.
And with a bona fide hit, I Just Want to Be Loved went through the roof, like the world was ready to embrace them all over again.
Music can do that, can't it? Close those gaps in time, bring back those feelings, those memories. Culture Club's music, it meant something to people back in the 80s, and that connection, it never really went away.
Though, like you said earlier, the music biz can be brutal. They had a good run with the reunion, but never quite hit those same highs again.
True, but those early days, those were lightning in a bottle. It's almost impossible to replicate that level of success. And they were still making great music, touring, proving they had staying power. Remember when they tried to tour without Boy George in the mid-2000s?
Oh, yeah, they held auditions and everything. Can you imagine Culture Club without Boy George's voice?
It's hard to picture. It just goes to show how important he is to the band's identity, that blend of artistry and personality.
Thankfully, that tour never happened. And the original four, they were back at it in 2014, even recorded new music. They really dedicated themselves to their craft, to the legacy of Culture Club.
Absolutely. And it speaks volumes about their music's lasting power. They could have just coasted, rely on nostalgia, but they kept creating, kept evolving, kept connecting with fans.
Really inspiring when you think about it. They had their share of ups and downs, personally and professionally, but they never gave up on their passion, on their music. Culture Club's story reminds us that music can transcend time, can challenge norms, can bring people together. They weren't just a band, they were a phenomenon, and they still captivate us, still inspire us.
So true. It's amazing how much one band's story can teach us about music, identity, resilience, about how culture never stops changing. They were fearless in being themselves, in pushing those boundaries.
They were one of a kind, so we want to know, what part of Culture Club's journey resonated with you? Was it the music, the fashion, the fact that they were always true to themselves? Whatever it is, we hope this deep dive inspires you to revisit their music, to understand their impact, and hey, maybe even find a little bit of Culture Club in yourself.
Beautifully said. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep the music playing.